the Chinese plan to invade Taiwan. They were trying to get the information which they need for an invasion. Is that it?
It could be Taiwan, it could be Japan, it could be the Philippines too. I think the most disturbing piece of evidence here is that the Chinese wanted radar in Okinawa, and one of the sailors, Thomas Zhao, actually provided that. And that really means that they are looking at what they can do in an attack on Japan or Taiwan, because an attack on Taiwan will inevitably result in an attack on Okinawa as well.
I'm curious about your thoughts, your concern over the other direction. So Chinese aggressive investment in the U.S. in everything from farmland to mining operations, their efforts to influence local regulatory policies at the state and federal level, as well as their efforts to influence our neighbors in our own region. And Central America and Honduras is a perfect example in recent months.
Yeah, sure. Well, they do, I think CFIUS...
The lack of an overarching regional security order in the Indo-Pacific. China's economic and political influence in its own geographic neighbourhood is described as a security challenge. It urges the EU to prepare a strategy that would allow us to react against China. It talks about increasing our joint efforts in capability development, building up EU military power to be a credible security actor in the region. And all of this to protect our security interests. Could we ever open an atlas? And could it tell me, what is it about Europe that entitles us to speak this way about an entire region of the world with 60% of the world's population as if it belonged to us, as if it was still a colonial backyard of Europeans? This isn't the 19th century. The European Union isn't in a position to boss around the rest of the world. We really seriously need a change in direction.
Well, everybody, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Alex here with Reporterfy Media, and I'm here with Cyrus Janssen. Cyrus, it's been a while. Welcome back.
It's been a while, brother. How are you? Good to see you.
Doing great. Lots to cover over the next hour here. What you been up to, Cyrus? I seen a couple of videos come up on your channel just recently. What's going on?
Yeah, well, just still kind of organizing a lot of videos for my recent China trip. So as you know, as many fans of the channel and people that follow us together, had a chance to go back to China last month, had a wonderful visit, had a chance to meet Alex in person for the first time there in Shanghai. And, it's we're really excited because there's a lot of things going on, I think, in the United States-China relationship that I focus on. I think one of the things that's so important in today's live stream, Alex, is this is a constant thing that I'm hearing in the United States, is that every single day media is doubling down. Media is doubling down and saying that, China is the biggest threat to the future of the United States. And I think, we have a lot of things that we want to share about this, because I think people need a different perspective about this. We constantly, when you get people like Gordon Chang, who is just one of the most extreme people in the world with his views on China. I don't think you can find someone as extreme as Gordon Chang, and really lacks a lot of rational thinking, really lacks a lot of in-depth thinking. And, and unfortunately, that is just what United States media has become. It has just become just this swamp of just deadly information where people are just, there's no control, there's no filter. And to be honest, the average American is completely confused on what's really happening in the world. And I think that's what's great about having a YouTube channel and being able to share independent views. And I think that's why, most Americans, it's quite interesting, because their overall impression of the media in the United States is declining. We, in general, in America, we don't really trust the media at all. We don't really trust the government at all. But yet it is interesting when we talk about China, it does seem like everybody gets on board and kind of will listen to anything that's being spewed on the television, most namely a person like Gordon Chang, who just doesn't lack really any valuable insights at all. I mean, he has nothing to add to the table, and we're going to break that down in today's stream.
I think it comes down to, responsibility, and that left a long time ago. I mean, we are seeing, the mainstream media is actually losing its relevance. To be honest with you, Cyrus, I've disconnected from the mainstream media. And if, I want some talking points, or if I want some, interesting intros to our talk show, all I have to do is just head over to YouTube, fire up Fox News, and put China in front of it, and there you go. It's ready and available for you. But I mean, this does come with consequences because, people used to have that trust, and now that trust is broken. And we see a lot of the mainstream media dissolving. Look at the actors. The actors, now you might think, okay, why do we care about the actors? Well, the whole business model is changing for media as well. And I'll try to break that down for the audience if they don't really get where I'm going with this. But back in 1996, music had a revolution happen. MP3 programs came in. They replaced compact discs, CDs, you name it, cassette tapes. It was all replaced. Now, that business model then shifted into Apple, which then shifted into companies like Spotify. Now, Spotify knows who its audience are, how old they are, men, women, what country they live in, what do they listen to. They are so intelligent that they understand that, hey, wait a moment, there's a band that was popular in 1985. We have an audience for it. They will be so smart that they will be able to go to that artist and say, okay, wait a minute, here's some money, get back into the studio. We know you got fans. Now, that is reading the analytics. The analytics on the traditional media is gone. You're seeing people like Tucker Carlson just the other day, one of the most successful streams in I think history. You're seeing, Megyn Kelly. Now, these might not all be names that you want to watch, but this is shifting, and we are seeing a massive shift. Just with the shift of Hollywood going to Netflix, everybody's getting upset. It's breaking the business model. Well, in this media, it's disruptive. And now we have people like the Duran, people like Brian Berletic, Cyrus Janssen, of course, and many other names. I mean, I think, over the next year or two, with all the news that has come out and, the lack of trust, we are going to see, quite an explosion here on the mainstream media if they let us have our voice. I'm going to hand that back over to you to deal with, Sarah.
No, that's Alex. You brought up a really good point, because I think we started seeing this really. Well, it's interesting. I think it really started in early 2000, right during the COVID pandemic. We started seeing. This was really the rise of various Chinese YouTube channels. I've been doing YouTube for 3 years now, and I know shout out to many of the followers who have been here for the entire journey and supporting. Alex, you and I, we met virtually online. Through COVID, we started making videos together, but it was interesting because I think what had happened is there was so much disinformation, there was so much misinformation during COVID, and a lot of people were, at that point, China really started getting blamed for so many things, and so many people really wanted to understand, what is the truth that's going on in China. I think what a lot of people don't realize is that right during the middle of the COVID pandemic, from kind of June 2020 through, August, September 2021. There was a really great, 15-month span where COVID was essentially non-existent in China. The economy was booming. Everybody was traveling domestically. I have so many friends and expats that are in China, and they're just like, man, we're living our best life. Like, we are living an unbelievable life in China right now. The only thing we can't do is we can't leave the country, and anybody that comes in is subjected to a 21 to 28-day quarantine. But, domestically, tourism was booming. The streets were packed. And that was right when most of the world was, under lockdowns. In Canada, where I was at, it was, strict lockdowns for a long time, QR codes to scan in to get anywhere, very strict policies, mandatory vaccines as well, which was never implemented in China. So, it was quite interesting, just all of these information. I think that's kind of the start of these YouTube channels. But, Alex, as you remember during that time, we had Meng Wanzhou. That was an entire catastrophe. You're a Canadian citizen as well. My wife and children are Canadians. That's why we were living in Canada. It was interesting. Because that's where we started seeing is I started going down to the courthouse in Vancouver and making these independent videos, interviewing, standout lawyers like Richard Kurland, who I was able to interview with you, but also I met him on this, the street right outside the steps of the Vancouver Supreme Courthouse. And it's just getting this raw footage from, an ordinary civilian who's kind of turned into this YouTuber slash, reporter, media figure, whatever you want to say. But, that's where I think it's becoming very powerful. And like you said, look at Tucker Carlson, he, has a falling out with Fox News. He had the #1 syndicated, TV show in America. And I mean, he brought in 4 million views, every time that he would, go on air. What's incredible though, Alex, is you see a guy like Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is bringing in 4 times that amount, 16 million views per episode of his podcast. So when you really talk about even Tucker Carlson achieving tremendous success on television, this is a reason why Joe Rogan has, $100 million deal with Spotify. I mean, he moves the needle. I mean, he is the needle. Right. I mean, he could really do that. And a lot of people will criticize Joe Rogan. Well, he's not an expert in this field. He's not that. He's not this. But, that's what people want, is something much more genuine and interested. I mean, look at what the work that you've done in Chongqing, really putting that city on the map. I mean, in fairness, I lived in China for 7 years. I never made it out to Western China. I never, the farthest west I went was Kunming and Yunnan province. That's the farthest west I've been. I've never made it out to Chongqing or Chengdu. Sorry, I did make it to Chengdu. I did do a business trip there once. I never made it to Chongqing. Never made it to your city. But I mean, I think people are really understanding that. Alex, every day I wake up and I look at, various YouTube comments, and it's kind of where the interesting point where if you say something positive about China, inevitably it's like, well, you're an agent of China. You're paid by the CCP. You're a CCP shill. Just if you say anything positive about China. And I think that's a really dangerous point in society, because there's a lot of things that are positive about China. There's a lot of good things that are happening there. And I think there's a lot of things that many Chinese people can be proud of. I mean, how they've risen in the last 50 years is nothing short of remarkable. I think what the Chinese government has done, bringing hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, can't be overlooked. And let's be fair and balanced, is the fact that there's many things that we can criticize as well. But it's just that if it's 100% criticism and there's nothing good spoken, then it's not an objective view either. We've got to have a balance there. And, and it's difficult for me as well as an American citizen, because, as a citizen of the United States, I mean, we have a government that has made tremendous amount of mistakes, when it comes to human rights, when it comes to, continuing, just a tremendous amount of policies that we do around the world that are unethical. And I mean, it's very difficult, I think, as an American citizen. You've got to take care of your own house first. And the United States has a tremendous amount of problems that we're going through as well. And not to say that China's not as well. I mean, China has a lot of issues that they're dealing with. So I think what we're really trying to do, Alex, is just try to be more rational and more balanced. And I think that's why a lot of people do enjoy the videos that we put out, so we can get a little bit more realistic, insight into China. And, and what I try to do always is foster a better relationship between the U.S. and China.
Thank you for that, Cyrus.
Yeah.
I mean, last year since arriving last year, I put out 164 productions while I was here, showing pretty much every part of the city, part of the counties, the culture, whether it's business, whether it's news. I mean, we tried to cover everything with the team here. Now, you mentioned something about, America needs to clean up its house. But what was really troubling is when you start to see the amount of money going offshore to other nations around the world, and you see all this, disproportionate people that are struggling. I mean, the Bank of England just recently raised its rates again. And I think what the audience hasn't seen yet is what happens when you see a consecutive rate increase of lending rates. Mortgages go up. We will start to see that impact probably the first quarter of 2024.
Yeah.
Now, this is going to make the election year very interesting, because when that starts to reset mortgages, unless there's a panic button where the administration says, wait a minute, we know this is coming. This is a ticking time bomb. How do we avoid this? It's where if these mortgages, well, they are going to reset. It's not if they are. And we had Peter Schiff on a couple of months ago talk about this. You're going to see people's mortgage payments. Let's say I've got an example. I know a couple that lives in Vancouver, Canada, from where you're from.
Oh, yeah.
They bought a modest house, 30-year mortgage. I think their monthly rate was about 1,400 to 1,600 Canadian a month. Okay.
Yeah.
And now they're looking at a $2,800 to $3,000 month payment
Yeah.
with the reset.
And you know what's interesting, Alex? In Canada, you cannot lock in. You can't lock in those rates, right? I think the maximum that you can lock in a mortgage rate would be 5 years, and then after 5 years, it'll be up for basically renewal. And that is an advantage in the U.S. At least you can lock in. You can get a 30-year fixed mortgage, and hopefully at the height of COVID, when mortgage rates were almost 0%, a lot of people locked that in, which was great. But now it's completely now mortgages are 5, 6, 7%. And I mean, I have a buddy of mine that's up in Whistler, Canada, which is a very, very difficult market to buy a house in. But he had a friend at a bank who gave him the lowest rate. So he's like, wow, I've got basically 3 years left. So I just hope this will sort out, because if I mean, that's the interesting thing. I mean, he's like, okay, I've got a payment of this, but if it were to expire, tomorrow, and we had to renew, we could potentially look at like doubling our mortgage payment. It would just be insane.
That's a house of cards when you think about it. It's a house of cards.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it could collapse. Now, I want to get into something here in the program here, and I'm going to tee up your, when you're ready, Cyrus, when you're ready, we'll tee up your cards that we got before the show here.
Sure.
But I want to show, just to set the tone on where I think the U.S. economy is focused right now, okay? And I trade these financial markets. I've been trading these financial markets for over 25 years. I'm a derivative trader. As soon as I leave here, I head onto the trading screens at night. And I've been doing that for about 20 years. And I've always seen a pattern go in these markets. This one here is the most troubling that I've seen here. Now, I'm going to start it off by showing this slide to the audience here. Now, this will have some relevance to what I'm talking about here. This is the U.S. military presence around the world. 750 bases in 80 countries, 100 and I believe that's 73,000 troops that were deployed in 159 countries. Where has the U.S. Bombed since World War II? Korea, China, Guatemala, Indonesia, Afghanistan, Yugoslavia, Afghanistan again, Iraq, Pakistan, Somalia, Yemen, Libya, et cetera, et cetera. So where am I going with all this? Well, I want to talk about one of the biggest companies in the United States right now. And if you don't think this company is ready, they're ready. Okay, this is BlackRock. Now, BlackRock, of course, has the traditional holdings of NVIDIA, Apple, the traditional things that you'd want to have in your long-term strategy. PG&E, Coca-Cola, pretty much, your standard mill companies. But I think what the public isn't understanding is visualizing BlackRock and understanding that it has $9 trillion under management, assets under management, $9 trillion. Just to wrap your head around that, the U.S. economy does $24 trillion annually.
Right.
Now, I'm not going down the conspiracy hole here, because there is some truth to this. Okay. And the picture gets a little bit uglier from here, all right? And this is where I think we have wound up with a massive geopolitical issue here that is not going to unwind itself. Everybody thinks this conflict in the Ukraine and Russia is going to be over maybe a month, 2 months. That country, we have Patrick Lancaster, who was on your show. Great interview if you guys haven't seen it. It's called An American in Ukraine, something like that, on your channel, Cyrus. Fantastic interview. Patrick Lancaster's a friend of mine. He's been down in that area for quite some time. And he's telling me, even if everything stopped tomorrow, we are talking decades of rebuilding. Decades, okay? Yeah. He says, even if there is a demilitarized zone, there's cleanup on a biblical scale. The rebuilding is one process. And during the rebuilding, there's a massive amount of, we'll call it loss of funds, okay? Anyway, I'm going to bring on to the next slide here. So BlackRock's investments are making a killing on killing. Weapons manufacturing, military contractors, civilian firearm manufacturers, investment that fuel war, death, destruction on our streets and around the world. Investments in weapon companies, both military and civilian, run counter to BlackRock's statement about holding companies accountable to be good corporate citizens. For example, the top 5 military contractors in the U.S. are Lockheed Martin. Biggest shareholder is, no surprise, BlackRock. Boeing, no surprise, top 5 shareholder, BlackRock. Raytheon, no surprise, top 5 shareholder, BlackRock. General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, all have numerous counts of waste and abuse of federal tax dollars. But it doesn't stop there, okay? We continue on, and we go on to see another slide. If you take Vanguard and BlackRock, by the year 2028, they will almost be at 80 to 85% of the U.S. annual economy in the United States.
That's
$20
amazing.
trillion between them. BlackRock and Vanguard could almost own everything by 2028. Now, to wrap this up, where I'm going with this is these companies are heavily invested. If you go back to this slide, they're invested in media.
Yeah.
Heavily invested in media. Matter of fact, Apple, you think Apple's not media? They're media.
Yeah.
You think Amazon's not media? They're media. Apple's platforms? Well, let's see. Who finances these movies? Who finances this message? Who finances, well, you could just see where Disney stumbled in the last year. So let's continue on. So at the end of the day, when BlackRock is saying, well, okay, it's not really our problem. We just invest in these companies. Well, then why are you guys showing up in the Ukraine with JP Morgan to set up a reconstruction fund? So not only are you supporting these arms, but you benefited on the other side here. And it's quite amazing that this happens. But this is the control here of a very, very powerful company that owns trillions of dollars in assets under management, that has control in the media, control with military weapons, control. I mean, we are talking a staggering amount of money here, Cyrus. These guys, if they want to go in and destabilize a country and say, all right, let's go into country ABC, let's get the media going, no problem. Let's get the arms in there, no problem. Let's get the mercenaries in there, no problem. And if they want to do it, they can do it, and they are doing it. And that's what's troubling me. I'm going to pass that over to you. I just wanted to kind of share that segment with the audience.
No, that's a really fascinating insight, Alex. And I always appreciate your insights into the financial market. Obviously, that's your main business, and you've been trading for 20, 30 years now. And I think it's, the interesting thing is I always want to share, my perspective as a United States citizen that is living back here in the U.S. at the moment. And I think what's been very interesting is I want everyone to remember, I lived abroad for 15 years. And so I have a very interesting perspective on the United States because, the last time I lived here full time was 2007, which was, or actually 2006. In 2007, January, I moved to China. But, from 2007 until, basically 2022, I was, living abroad, 10 years in China, 5 years in Canada. And I came back to the United States last year, for some personal reasons. One, I wanted to be closer back to my parents as they're aging. I want them to be able to see their grandchildren. And, two, I do feel that it's important to be on the ground kind of in the U.S. or China, since that's mainly what I deal with, right? I deal with U.S.-China relations. And it's been actually very helpful for me, running this YouTube channel to have a perspective of being here in the U.S. because there's one thing that, there's a lot of great things about the United States. But what's interesting is just talking to the local people here and really understanding like how the average American thinks, because I would have to say that our government in the United States is, we have absolutely mastered the art of propaganda inside this country. I mean, I don't think there's another country in the world that can even come close to how our government puts out propaganda, and because we do it so subtly. And we do it and we mask it so well. But the interesting thing is that, for example, I live in Las Vegas right now. In Las Vegas, we have an Air Force Base, Nellis Air Force Base, that is very big. So it's a very large military presence in the state of Nevada, specifically in Las Vegas. So, constantly at my children's school, many of the parents there, they either work for the Navy, the Air Force, military, Army, whatever it is. There's a lot of servicemen and women that are living here in Las Vegas. And what's interesting is that I have been able to chat with them, and learn a lot about the U.S. military, our objectives and everything. And, for example, honestly, just yesterday we had one of the women came over, and she's a former Air Force pilot, graduated from N.Y.C, brilliant woman, and she was a Air Force pilot, and we were talking about all of these fighter jets in the U.S. and she's like, all right, we got the F-16s, we got the F-18s, F-25s, F-35, I think is our latest one, and and I'm just like, what is the cost of an F-16? And she's like, well, that one is kind of our classic one, right? The first one, I think the first commissioned flight was 1981, so that's probably around 20 million. But our most advanced one, the F-35, I mean, we're talking, a couple $100 million, per a pop. And I mean, and it's just, and I'm like, so how many do we have? It's like, oh, we've got just thousands, I mean, we just have so many of them. I mean, we're selling them to other countries. We're giving them away. We're, actually we give a lot away to, the Middle East, we got them all over the place. And so it's like, it's quite amazing to see, how much money we're just pouring out, building the military. And I was just like, it's kind of wild though, when you look at the streets of America and you look at a lot of these big cities now, LA, Portland, Seattle, I mean, all of these very liberal cities, that are honestly, I mean, the homelessness problem is through the roof right now in the United States. I mean, it's just shocking to see, to go to LA. I mean, and just walk down the streets of LA. I mean, it looks like a third world country. I mean, it looks awful. And I just see this paradox. It's like, wow, we're spending literally hundreds of millions of dollars on one single F-35 airplane. And, yet we have so many domestic issues here, like we could easily be funding, bringing that back in and helping the actual people in the United States and solving, really big issues here. But this is what I mean is that we don't, the average American, we've been taught in this country that when you see a fighter jet go by, it's like, that's the sound of freedom. That's the sound of freedom right there. And I mean, and to me, it's just one of the biggest pieces of propaganda. And, I mean, it's one of the things that we hear constantly in the United States. It's quite amazing. I mean, every time, before every sporting event, it's like, let's take a moment on our servicemen who are fighting around the world to protect our freedoms here in the United States. And it's quite interesting because I'm always thinking, well, who's threatening our freedoms, right? Like, we're a sovereign country. I mean, let's be honest. Who's going to mess with the United States? I mean, geographically, we're the most blessed nation in the world. We've got two massive oceans to our left and right. I mean, that really, who's going to launch an amphibious attack with those oceans? I mean, that's almost impossible. You've got Canada to the north. You couldn't ask for a better neighbor than Canada. And you've got Mexico to the south, which, Mexico's not doing anything. I mean, the United States is absolutely, absolutely the most protected nation in the world. And it's kind of this thing that's installed in our culture of just like, we need to be increasing the military budget. It's now over $1 trillion a year that we're spending on the military. We need to keep funding these things because, freedom. But it's interesting, Alex, when you go from your perspective and you're looking at BlackRock and Vanguard, where they're investing, how they're making money. And, I had another naval pilot, actually a Top Gun, a guy that was literally in the Top Gun Academy. He's just like, Cyrus, the Ukraine war is best case scenario for the United States. I'll just be flat honest because we risk 0 American lives. We can basically take on Russia, using Ukraine for that. And my question to him is, I said, well, what about the people in Ukraine? I've been very vocal. I mean, I'm very clear that, I don't support what's going on in Ukraine, but I want a ceasefire. Like, I think that is by far the best thing that could happen is to get a ceasefire and end the people dying, get a resolution. As you always say, Alex, I'm the ambassador of peace, or I always prefer peaceful resolution. So, I mean, what's interesting in that regards, Alex, is we saw Saudi Arabia. They just hosted a huge peace talk summit with 40 countries around the world. And even Saudi Arabia came out and said, look, we can leverage our relationship because we have a relationship with Russia. We have a relationship with Ukraine. We have a relationship with China. We are kind of a neutral party. So if there's somebody that could, basically mediate this potential conflict and come up with a solution, I think maybe Saudi Arabia can do it. And, and it's interesting because a lot of people in the West, especially the Republicans, they're just like, no, the only option here is to continue and we're going to fight until, Putin is defeated and Russia is destroyed. That's the end of the war. And, the problem with that is, as we know, this is a war that, for example, for Russia, I mean, this is a war they cannot lose. So, I mean, it's not like they're going to retreat. I mean, they're going to fight to the death. in this war. So, like you said, there is not going to be an end to this conflict within the next month, 2 months, 3 months. I mean, this is going to be a very long, prolonged event. So I think any kind of peace talks that are going there, it would be great. But it was just interesting to hear again that Top Gun, fighter pilot who just said best case scenario for us. And my question to him was, well, what about the people of Ukraine? Like that, that country is getting wrecked. Like it is, like you said, if they stop today, we're looking minimum 20 years to rebuild that country, and possibly longer. I mean, it's Armageddon devastation in that country. And he's like, well, it is what it is. That's just, that's just the nature of the game. Like, what can we do? I mean, and so I think it's, it's very interesting because, Alex, I want you to bring up one of my slides about the media. I want you to bring that slide up here because I think this is quite an interesting perspective I want to share with you.
Is that one?
Yeah, let's go with the yep, exactly. So I mean, I just want people to really understand this as far as, this is an interesting thing that we talk about, right? Because we hear about, China, America has this amazing advantage because we have free press and free media. And, there's not a lack of censorship. There's no censorship, in the United States. It's a free and open thing, which in a minute I'll discuss that censorship thing. But share of U.S. adults that have a great deal, quite a lot of confidence in newspapers and TVs as of 2022. So, I mean, we go back to 1993. I mean, 1993, Bill Clinton is in office. I mean, America is kind of seen as a very, very positive in that time. I mean, we're still under 50%. Right. I mean, this is incredibly, that is, 30 years ago, where it's still 50%. But you look at TV news down to 11%. 11% of the population has confidence in the news as of 2022. Newspaper slightly higher at 16%. So what's interesting here, Alex, is that, over the last 30 years, I mean, even again, 30 years ago, it wasn't really remarkably higher. It is interesting that, 30 years ago, 46% to 31%, that is quite a big difference there. But I mean, we've just seen a steady decline. And I think that goes back to the opening segment that we talked about, Alex, is that people are more interested in hearing independent journalism, and that is really the rise. And we've seen this from YouTubers. I mean, there's so many wonderful YouTubers out there creating a tremendous amount of, news stories. And, you look at a guy like Patrick Lancaster, who's just an American, literally risking his life every single day on the ground, filming content and giving that perspective. And I'll be the first to admit that I don't know a lot about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. That's not that's not my area of expertise. And that's why, a year ago when I sat down with him, it was more for me to learn. I just said, hey, you're an American that's lived in the Donbass region since 2014. You speak Russian. You're there every single day on the streets. Your opinion absolutely is valuable, right? Your opinion most definitely needs to be heard. And quite frankly, I'd like to learn from you. And we sat down and we had a very interesting interview. It was, very educational for me and that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is trying to research and learn, these different perspectives. But this is what's so powerful with, I think, media and things like that. But we also I want people to realize as well, is that we are, as YouTubers, we're constantly battling censorship. I don't know if you heard this story. Did you hear that there was a NASCAR race driver, Alex? He's been suspended by NASCAR because he liked a George Floyd meme on Twitter. Right. So he's, so again, like there is, so we're at a point now where, this cancel culture in the United States is so prevalent. I mean, it is such a big thing right now where, people, we talk about, we have freedom of speech here in the United States. Well, it's very interesting because there's a lot of things that you cannot say or else you will be canceled, and I do feel that this is an invasion of freedom of speech because, for example, I mean, even if you want to go on and, I mean, the big thing here in the United States is, gender laws and things like that. If you, I mean, we've seen people, there's an NCAA swimmer who said that there are two sexes, there's male and female, and she got her Twitter account of 200,000 people, deplatformed. She was deplatformed for vocally, saying that. And, it's like, well, hey, look, I'm an NCAA swimmer. This is what I feel. And no, you can't say that. You're now deplatformed from Twitter. You now have been canceled. And so she had to start a new account when Elon Musk happened. And it's just very interesting where we want to, on one side, we want to blame China for okay, China censors content. Absolutely they do. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to deny that China censors content. There's a lot of censorship that happens in China for sure. But it's also very interesting to see how, okay, you're a celebrity and you've said this thing, well, you're now canceled. You're now canceled. You risk deplatformed. You and I, we've had videos scrubbed off of YouTube. I remember putting out a YouTube very early about the Hong Kong protest in May 2020. I put out a YouTube video and it was removed directly from YouTube saying this does not meet our community guidelines. And what's interesting with that is that you never get a reason from YouTube. It's always, it doesn't meet our community guidelines. And you can send an email in, can you specifically tell me what part of the video? No, we can't. It just hasn't met our community guidelines. So you don't actually know. There's no feedback. It's just, it doesn't match what we want on the platform. And sorry, I'm going off a tangent here, but the big story that's happening right now in Canada, once again, our country, Canada, back in, Justin Trudeau, Justin Trudeau has passed now this, is moving along with this bill C-11, which is designed to basically monitor all free and independent voices that are on social media. So if you are in Canada and you are a YouTuber or you're on Instagram or Twitter, whatever content that you are putting out, it is now subjected to the same laws and regulations that TV and newspapers are regulated to in Canada. So, for example, if you have anything that says, for example, the big topic in Canada was, for example, vaccines, COVID vaccines. If you have anything that goes against what the government's position is, you're out. They will absolutely censor you. You will either get that post that will be deleted from the Canadian government, or you will risk being deplatformed because you cannot simply say that. And that is so this was a very dangerous thing. So this was, first of all, went right to YouTube headquarters in California. They emailed every Canadian content creator and they said, look, this is a massive deal because this is a huge violation of freedom of speech. And, this is a very risky thing for Canada to do. Even YouTube, they paid for YouTubers, Canadian YouTubers, they flew them to Ottawa. They flew them to the parliament and they said, look, we will fly you there to protest and to basically get in front of the government. And we want you to just make videos about it. We will help you promote those videos. This is a dangerous thing that the Canadian government and Justin Trudeau is going under. And, they did it. They protested, they did their things and they had their voice. And of course, that's the other interesting thing is it's like, yes, they have the freedom to protest and go speak. But at the end of the day, it doesn't do anything. At the end of the day, it's like, thanks for coming. Really appreciate you spending time here in Parliament and saying that. You can go home now because we're going to go pass the bill. And that's exactly what Justin Trudeau is moving forward with that because, he honestly, he's the worst leader that Canada's had. I would say, arguably in history. He's absolutely just been a horrific leader for Canada. And it's just horrible the way that he is leading that country. And I think we see that last week. His wife finally said, I can't take it anymore. I'm out.
I'm going to bring on Cyrus. I have Angelo backstage here. He resides, I'll let him explain. Let's bring him onto the show for a bit here, and then we're going to get back to your slides. And I have a lot to say about your media, where you said, the media started to go downhill. Well, that was around 95, 96. We started to see the arrows go down. Well, that was the birth of the internet, where, I got my first sitting at the computer, and I never left a computer for 3 days, and was watching and reading and saying, wait a moment, that wasn't what I learned in school books. Wait a minute, that wasn't part of my curriculum. And that changed the world as we know it. Let's bring on Angelo here. I think he's out in the sunshine there. I'm not sure where. Hey, Angelo, how are you? This is Cyrus and Alex. How's it going?
Hi, my friends. I'm so glad to be with you guys. I heard Cyrus was coming, so I was like, let me jump in like 10, 15 minutes because I love what Cyrus is doing.
Do you guys know each other? Do you guys know each other?
We do. We've done on live streams together. Angelo, I haven't seen you in a while, brother, but it's good to see you, man.
And look, I got to show you. I'm here like in Switzerland. This is Switzerland. So beautiful Switzerland by the lakeside. It's just amazing. And I like to come to Switzerland once a year just to see the contrast. Our society, Western society is changing, and also and living in China. That's the blessing of my life. Close to 3 decades in China, and I think we have a responsibility. We don't need to say that China is nice and so on. We just need to tell people how is China? What is happening in China? And it's hard to criticize China because everything is positive. Every single day, you see positive changes. And guess what? You know, China doesn't need, it's not up to us to like China. It's up to Chinese. Okay, most of the foreigners that live in China, they love it. But then you talk to Chinese and they are so happy. Do you know why? Because they've seen the changes of the last 40 years. You know, they saw how China was, they see China, how China is now, and the direction where China is going. And what puts me to shame, because, well, you know, I think it's important also to tell people that we love our countries. And it's not because we like China that we speak, you know, nicely about China. It's also, we need to step out and speak up about the reality. Because the direction, when you look at Western media, this whole narrative about China being bad and so on, it is a responsibility from our side just to tell the truth. What is happening? It's very positive, and I think we should. For me, was actually not only I was learning a lot about China, but by being in China, it was an opportunity to learn about my own society. I just give you an example. Just this concept of democracy. With so many years in China, I realized that the way they see democracy is not the mob rule, the 51% that is going to rule over the 49%. It's not, because this is a dividing thing. It's a mob rule. It's going to be one majority at the expense of the minority. The way it works in China is very different. They take into account, okay, we are the majority, there's a minority. How can we reach a conclusion, a compromise where everybody's going to be happy? Because in a Western society, what we have is that you see the Republicans, Democrats, which, by the way, ultimately are all the same, but every time you have this antagonizing two sides, and every time there's one side which is extremely unhappy. In China, it's very different. It's very mature. It's not a divided and controlled system. It's really about how we can find common prosperity, people being satisfied, and you know, what they're looking at is they're looking at how we can have stability, how we can have prosperity, and how we can have tangible results. You know, in China, the politicians cannot lie to their people. If they were to lie, you know, you have 5 years, 10 years plan, 20 years plan, they can't lie. They need to deliver. If they don't deliver, that would be a chaos. There's not a single politician in China that can say, well, you know what, I'm going to build this road, and 5 years later, nothing happened. They need to deliver. Well, in the West, it's a vicious circle of elect and regret. They don't deliver. It doesn't matter. I'm going to tell you what you want to hear. If I deliver or not, it doesn't matter. And ultimately, do they listen to the voters? No. They will listen to whoever funds them. So I think what we need to do is bridge. That's what we're trying to do here, is bridging. You know, there's a misconception, misunderstanding from both sides. But I would say, honestly, you know what? Chinese, they know about the Western world. They know how we function. The problem is on the West. We even know our own society, and we don't even know anything about China. The only thing that they know about China, what do they know? They know Xi Jinping. That's all they know. You know, if you talk to average Joe, a taxi driver in Hong Kong, not in Hong Kong, any big cities, they will know everything about Western politics. And this is the attitude of Chinese. You know, they say 知己知彼, know yourself and know your enemy. You know, and the problem is we have in the West is this arrogance. We are self-centered, and we think we are the best, and this is going to be all loss. You know, we have such an opportunity to work together. There's so much we can learn from China and vice versa, and have this common prosperity. And the problem, sadly, you mentioned just before, Ukraine, you know, they were like for the last 18 months, oh, we love Ukraine and so on. And we just realized that, you know what, they're using Ukraine, and they keep on doing the same thing. Proxy wars. What is the next one? We see in Africa, they're going to try to use Nigerians to invade Nigeria. You know, Africans against Africans. It's all the divide and conquer. But they do it not only on geopolitics, they do it at home too. it's a system where you have the Republicans and Democrats. You need to have them fight, so it gives you an illusion of free choice and democracy, but it's not, because ultimately it's a fight, not the left and the right. It's the upper class and the 99%. Up's the one up and the one down. And they need to confuse you and divide constantly, because otherwise they will lose the power. What they're afraid of is that people, the 99%, they realize that they're being used all over, all the time. And China is different. You know, China is so complex. It's a huge population. They can't afford to have this divide and conquer. This is why you would never see a Western style democracy in China. It will not work, because in many ways it doesn't fit China, its culture, and it's problematic. It's a very complex society. And ultimately, you know what? Where does it work? Look around. You know, Harvard University, they did surveys on China and in the US. 30% of the people in the US, they're happy with their system. So yeah, that means 70% are not happy. Well, guess what? China, 95%, and that's Harvard University. Unless people say that Harvard University that has a bias for the Chinese Communist Party, but it's not. You know, that's the reality. So I think we need to, you know, we need all society just to look at all society better, you know. But it's not by looking at China and saying, well, China us, how can I destroy China so I will look better? Why don't we do introspection, look at our own society and see how can we do better? Because look at the last 30 years. What have we done for people? What have we done? Nothing. You know, my parents, they used to live much better 30, 40 years ago than the new generation now. My parents, you know, only my father was working, my mother was staying at home, and they could raise 2 kids and have a house. Now, right, you know, people are working 3 jobs. You know, they're starving. You know, they are in a, you know, it's this whole society of, you know, they just make sure you are in a survival mode, and they keep people divided, and they distract people over identity issues, over BS. Why? When ultimately what people are asking is food on the table, education, healthcare. Sorry, it was a small marathon, guys. I have to leave. I'm just outside.
Thank you so much, Angelo.
I love what you guys are doing. Keep on doing what you are doing. We are, you know, we need to look at the big picture. And again, what we are doing this not only for world peace, but also, you know, for our own country. You know, I think it's important that we tell people that if we do this, it's also because we love our country and we want it to prosper within this multipolar world.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate that.
Angelo, great. Yeah, great insight, Angelo. So good to see you. And you know, you've been a great voice on this issue for many years, and you know, really appreciate it. Thank
you, my friends. I see you guys soon.
Take care, Angelo. Yeah, bye-bye.
We'll see you.
That was great to see, Angelo. So Cyrus, I want to go back to some of your points that you made here earlier in the show. Yeah. We were talking about media, and we have the slide up here, and I'm going to bring it back up for a moment here, and I just want to get to chat about it. So if you see there in around 93, 94, 95, then there's a graph, steady graph all the way down. It's going to continue that way. What's happened is people now have tools that they can go out and they can get the other side or research the other side. And these are why people end up on our channels. Thank you very much to all the subscribers. I mean, Absolutely. It means a lot to us. It means a lot when you come in, and that's okay. And if you're in the comment section, you disagree or you don't agree with everybody, if you think somebody has a bias, listen, I was born in Canada. The internet was a massive life changer for me. If we have some of the young audience in here, maybe you were born with the internet, but imagine having the internet at 26 for your first time, opening up a computer and voila, being able to ask a computer questions that maybe you waited weeks or months, or waited a couple of months to get a book ordered in the library so that you could read and research on that. this information just came piling. But, Cyrus, you made a comment about, this conflict in Ukraine, and we're not going to spend too much time on that in the show today, but they do not want this war over. It cannot end for the military-industrial complex. It's not going to end. And this term where we hear people say, well, we will beat Russia. I've asked this many a times to people. What does that mean, you're going to beat Russia? Or you want to beat Russia? Well, if we put more jets in, if we put more tanks in, if we put more cluster bombs in, if we put more ammunition in, if we put NATO troops in, you cannot win. It's not about, game of chess where everybody's there and it's checkmate. No, it doesn't happen. You continually push this country, Russia, into a corner. And let's say you do get the advantage, Cyrus. Let's say NATO and the NATO-led support for the Ukraine does get the upper hand on this. And you hear guys like Lindsey Graham, we'll fight to the last soldier. We want to wipe Russia off the planet. This country, hello everyone, this country has the capability to blow up the entire globe about 100 times. Yeah. And if backed into a corner, we might say, oh no, it'll never get to that. No, it won't get to that. Didn't we just have an anniversary a couple of days ago of a country that did it twice and obliterated a population in Japan, Nagasaki and Hiroshima?
Right.
So this is what these guys that are making these decisions are messing with. I can only tell you from having my conversations with Patrick Lancaster, it's terrible on the other side too.
Yeah.
There's soldiers dying on both sides. It's horrible. But you are wiping out an absolute generation of young men that are going to be needed to rebuild that country. And they're dying in the thousands of every day. And nobody, Cyrus, you're the ambassador of peace. Where the hell is everybody? Where is France? Where's Germany? Where's Italy? Where's one single country in the European Union or the collective West that says enough is enough? We've seen enough people die. So many people are dying. It's us against them. It's, oh, no, let's ramp up NATO in Sweden. Oh, no, let's ramp up NATO in Finland too. And the Baltic states, of course, they feel vulnerable. 25% of their population is ethnic Russians.
Yeah.
You've got Kaliningrad. You got all these other breakaways. I sent you a tweet yesterday about what Latvians doing to ethnic Russia. It's an absolute mess. This could be avoided. Somebody should sit down at the table. I appreciate the Saudis having this, but there's one major party that's not at the negotiation table or was invited, and that's Russia. So that's going nowhere.
True.
Stalemate, as Alex Christoforou says.
Yeah.
We got some good slides here, Cyrus. Tell us you want me to put up the next one?
Yeah, let's I think let's get back to the China issue. I want you to bring up that Nikki Haley video. I think this will be a good one. So
I'm going to play this twice if you guys don't mind. Okay. So it's a short video of Nikki Haley, but let me see where it is. Carry on, Cyrus. I'm going to come back. I'm going to find this file for you. Okay. Give me a moment. All right. I'll just hand it over to you for a second. Okay.
Yeah.
I've just got to upload it. So
I'll
be about 2 minutes.
Okay, sure, no problem. Well, I think, Alex, let's lead into that. Let's bring up that slide that you just had in there. I think that was a really good one because I want people to understand. I sent out a tweet. So put up my tweet that I sent out, a couple weeks ago. I sent out this tweet that really performed really well, and I want people to just understand exactly, what's going on with, kind of our message and how things have shifted, specifically with China. Let's really keep it to China. And I want people to kind of go back in time because, up until 2017, really, Americans did not believe that China was the greatest threat to, the future of, basically to the future of the United States. And so I think what we're really seeing is that, I think we got to go back in time and see what has happened, right? We've had Donald Trump launch a trade war against China in 2018. Donald Trump really started doubling down on the fact that, started using China as a scapegoat for the United States problems. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing in the United States is that has continued to, basically compound. And, we've seen this thing where all of a sudden Donald Trump is saying, look, China is taking advantage of the United States as far as, its trade, our trade deficit, they're getting a better deal than what we're getting. It should be America first. We should be getting a better deal. We need to be ending this trade war. The interesting thing about that is that it actually hurt most Americans, because what you're doing is you're putting tariffs on the Chinese goods that American citizens actually need. And I think this is an interesting stat that many people don't realize, is that, we constantly hear this thing that China's the biggest threat. We constantly hear that we need to decouple from China. But as of last year, Chinese imports into the United States actually increased by 6%. Actually increased by 6%. I think that's a phenomenal stat that people need to understand. And last year, $564 billion worth of products, left China and entered into the United States. So the issue is that, we have so many things that are, that are manufactured in China that are really driving the United States economy. And, one of the things that I do is I talk with a lot of, factory owners. I talk with businessmen here in the United States. And it's just interesting. I mean, even if we look at the studio, things from my headphones to the speaker, to my laptop, to the cameras, to, the mouse that I use, to everything. I mean, all of this is really manufactured in China. And there's a really important reason why that is done. And it's also, for many of you, for example, if you've watched one of my latest videos, is I launched a video talking about, I visited a Chinese factory. I actually went, flew to China, went to N.Y.C, went to a smaller town called Jiangyin, which is really the textile factory of China. There's a tremendous amount of textile factories in that local area. Some of the most successful textile companies in all of China are located in Jiangyin. And I went and visited these factories. And it's just what's remarkable about China that people don't really understand. And this is what I really thought was just so fascinating, is that, for example, if you're manufacturing clothing in China, well, in Jiangyin, they have all of your manufacturers are basically in that same area. So, for example, if you need buttons, there's a button factory down the road. If you need, the cotton is down the road. The zippers, everything is kind of manufactured in this one area. And that is what, so many of the raw materials that are used for manufacturing clothing, they're all located within China. So it's really interesting when we hear, like, we need to move these factories out of China. Let's move them to Vietnam. Let's move them to, Mexico. Let's move them to wherever we want to move them to. The fascinating thing is, oh, there we go. There's the video right there. So this is the video that I put out. And so this is what me, walking through the factory there. This is a factory called Calito. It was a great opportunity for me to collaborate with this factory there. I interviewed a Norwegian national who is the owner, he's a co-owner of this factory. And I think what was really interesting about this, Alex, was just being able to see the Chinese advantage of being able to have all of these raw materials, basically within a 20-30 minute drive of their factory. If they need embroidery, there's an embroidery factory down the road. If they need to dye the fabrics, okay, because obviously all these fabrics have different colors, that's just right down the road as well. And I think that's what China, they just do that so well, is manufacturing the entire logistical supply chain is just phenomenal. I mean, it really is truly incredible. You guys can go to my channel and watch that video later on. But basically, there's Tommy there on the left, who is the Norwegian businessman that's been there for over 10 years. Been traveling to N.Y.C for over 16 years, doing business there, and being this bridge between the West and East, which is just phenomenal. But Alex, do you have that clip up of Nikki Haley here? I want to show that. And just a quick segment here. I want to thank John Lee and Tom Liu for sending those super chats in, guys. Thank you so much for, thank you so much for your support to the channel. Really appreciate it, as always. So, Alex, let's go ahead and tee this video up. This is quite an interesting one.
Sure. And we'll play it a couple of times. It's a 30-second clip, or if you can handle it more than once. That's
Let's play it twice. I think people need to hear this.
Okay, all right, here we go. Let me just get the thanks again for all the super chats. We do appreciate that, and your support does help these channels as well. And let's bring up this clip. Here we go, Cyrus. All right, here we are.
Nikki Haley fought America's enemies at the UN and won.
China's dictators want to cover the world in communist tyranny.
Nikki Haley, tough as nails, smart as a whip, unafraid to speak the truth.
Communist China won't just lose. Like the Soviet Union before it, Communist China will end up on the ash heap of history.
Nikki Haley, a strong leader for a strong America. SFA Fund Inc. is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Hey, Alex, let me break that down first, and then we'll play it again. I mean, there's a couple things that I want people to understand. This is the interesting thing. The first, I think there's two major problems with this clip. Number one, Nikki Haley is first of all, this is what is happening in American politics, which is very different from anywhere else in the world. Having lived in Canada for 5 years, what's interesting with Canada is that the laws in Canada, it's very specific when you're running your political ads that, you have certain guidelines, right? Like in Canada, you don't have candidates attacking other candidates. You have to be very clear with your language. It's a much more civil environment. And the interesting thing with Canada's government is that you call an election. There's not a set date, right? If you're the current prime minister, you can basically call an election. When let's say, hey, we're going to have an election now, 6 weeks from now, you vote. So you have a very short window to actually campaign. It's a very different system. In the United States, as we know, we have an election every 4 years. So what's happening now is, for the next 18 months, Americans are going to be bombarded with political ads. And basically, it's just everybody attacking everybody. There's no rules. You can say whatever you want. You can basically, slander. You can attack. You can basically, have these very crazy campaigns against your competitors. And this is what's happening in the United States, is that people are going to try to tap into your emotions. And this is what people are saying. It's like Nikki Haley, very strong Republican, saying China wants to spread communism around the world. They want to spread their method all over the world to many countries around the world. That's the first thing that I've been saying this for years. I don't see any evidence of this at all. Zero. I don't see China ever wanting to export its model. And quite frankly, I would be the first one to say, look, I don't want Chinese communism inside the United States, mainly because it's a different model. It just, every country in the world has to figure out a model that works for them. I think with China, and what you've seen when you talk to intelligent business people that actually understand this, a good example would be Charlie Munger, who is the right-hand man of Warren Buffett. He was very vocal. He said, there is no way that China could have risen from one of the poorest countries in the world in 1949 to the second most powerful economy, soon to be most powerful economy in the world, under a democracy. It just wouldn't have happened because there's too much fighting, there's too much bickering, and the reality is that when you're that poor and you need to transform that quickly, you need a one-party state to essentially make clear decisions. Look, this is our 5-year plan. This is what we're going to do. We're going to go execute that plan. Now, that's not to say that China didn't make mistakes along the way. Obviously, we look at the Great Leap Forward. We look at the Cultural Revolution. These are very dark times for China that, were filled with massive mistakes that under Mao Zedong. So yes, China made mistakes along the way. We've also done similar mistakes where, we've been involved in, you look at the Vietnam War, that was an absolute disaster for the United States. I mean, my father was stationed in Vietnam for 2 years, and it was quite interesting, listening to him because he was a young man. Oh, there we go. Lost my... Oh, hold on. I'm going to have to...
no problem, Cyrus.
I don't know why my battery dies out. Never used to do that, but we're going to switch. Look at
no
this.
worries. Take your time.
We're going to switch over here.
All right, here
we're back in the game here. All right. So, the interesting thing, Alex, is that, my father, he fought in the Vietnam War, and, I'm always interested to hear his experiences with that because he said, Cyrus, what we would do is, we would basically I was in Da Nang. We'd be flown in there with my troops. And what we would do is we would have a grid. Let's imagine it's this screen. And so what we would do is we would start here in the corner and we would just march all the way over, go down, march all the way over, go down. And we would basically complete this grid like this in the jungle. We would do that for 2 weeks. We'd then be flown back to base and we would rest for a week. And then we'd go back and we'd go to another plot. And we would and I'm like, well, what were you doing? What are you marching there? And he's like, I don't really know. We were just marching, looking for people. If we saw somebody, we'd try to shoot them. And I'm like, what was the purpose? And he's like, I'm not really sure. Like, that's just what we did for like a year of my life. I would just walk through the the jungles of Vietnam. None of us really knew. I mean, he's a farm boy from Iowa. He left very young age, to get out in the military. And I think what was, really interesting is we look back. I mean, I know, many Americans were against that war. I mean, there was no strategic purpose there. Again, you go back to America's biggest fault. Our thing was the domino theory, right? We wanted to go in and say, look, we need to change Vietnam from a communist country into a democracy, or else communism is going to spread to every country in Asia, and it's going to be a disaster. That theory did not work out. Obviously, communism didn't spread. Vietnam, by the way, America lost that war. And the thing is that it's very interesting because you talk to older. I remember talking to. I was working in Hong Kong about 2017. I had a guy that flew out for an American company, and he's just like, yeah, I was in the Marine Corps. He's like, I just flew into Saigon, and he goes, and I go, Saigon? You mean Ho Chi Minh City? He's just like, we call it Ho Chi Minh City. America, we won that war. It's called Saigon. I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure it's called Ho Chi Minh City. Actually, I actually went there, and I'm just like, sorry to burst your bubble. We didn't win the war, but it kind of had this spite and anger in his voice of frustration because he was there. It's like, look, I served in Vietnam. I'm like, hey, so did my father. But I'm like, at the end of the day, Vietnam's a communist country. Like I'm not, that's not propaganda. Like that's just a fact. And you can call it Saigon, but that's not what it's called. It's called Ho Chi Minh City because that's who, whoever wins the war gets to write the history books. Guess what? It's called Ho Chi Minh. And it's that's just what it is. And so I think the interesting thing here, Alex, is, we are seeing these same mistakes. We got involved in the Vietnam War because of a domino theory, the fact that communism is going to spread. We didn't see it happen. It didn't happen. Vietnam has remained communism. Now, when N.Y.C comes out and says that China wants to spread its philosophy, I don't believe that at all. I don't see any evidence of that at all. What I see China wanting to do is run their own system. Now, is communism the best system for China? Honestly, as foreigners, that's really not for us to debate. I'm not a Chinese national. I don't serve in China's government. That is a decision that Chinese people and Chinese government officials have to sort out. But what I do think, what a lot of people, we kind of equate in America, I see this big thing of, in China, you don't get to vote for your president. Yeah, that's true. You don't. But, the problem is that when I was in China last month, it was really interesting, Alex. I had a lot of people I was talking to on the street. They asked me, it's like, how is Biden the president? Like, how is that guy your president? Like, did you guys vote for him? Like, he's so old and he really is struggling with his cognitive functioning right now. He's just not as clear, and I'm just like, yeah, Biden, it's just, unfortunately, like Angelo said, we have this very big system of elect and regret. And what's interesting is we're moving towards 2024. And right now, the front runners are Biden, Trump again. It's looking like another Biden, Trump. And it's like, wow, are we really going to have a repeat of 2020? And basically, two guys, one guy that's going to be 82, 83 years old, another guy, Trump, it's not young either. He's approaching 80 as well. Is that really the two best options in the United States? So it's interesting because, yes, I do get a choice as an American citizen. I get to vote, but the problem is I've only got two choices. America only has two parties. We only have one additional party to China, which is quite interesting, because we, so I think that's the first problem with that Nikki Haley clip, Alex, is that they, Americans are using this as propaganda. Like I said, we're very good at propaganda in the United States. That is 100% propaganda. China does not want to export its system around the world. I've never seen China saying, hey, you know what, America, you should change to communism, or even Africa. That's the interesting thing when you look at the Belt and Road, which I've broken down in many videos. It doesn't matter if you're a democracy, if you're an autocracy, if you're a dictator, it doesn't matter what you are. China goes in there to do business. Hey, we're going to build you a bridge. Can you start exporting this mineral to us? I don't really care what government it is. Like, we'll build you the bridge, and then you give us this asset. Like, this is a transaction. How you guys how you guys take care of your government and how your people, that's none of our business. We could care less, right? Just don't come into our space and say, we need to do that. And I think there's an important thing that people need to realize right now. I want people to really understand this. I'm going to go out. I'm going to say this very clearly. There is not a country in the world, forget China, there's not another country in the world that is looking at the United States right now as a model democracy. Okay. That's, our democracy is so dysfunctional. It is declining rapidly every day. And, there is so many internal issues that we have. Go talk to people in France and Germany on how they view American democracy. I lived in Canada for 5 years. I can't tell you how, this was what was amazing, Alex, right? I would tell people, oh, Cyrus, meeting somebody new in Canada. And it's like, oh, I'm actually, I'm from the US. And they're like, oh, I can see why you left. Welcome to Canada. Like, oh, really? You're from the U.S.? You had this almost kind of pity and this thing of just like, man, like what happened to your country? Like, Canadians, generally speaking, Canadians love America, right? They follow American politics. American politics is much more entertaining than Canadian politics. Like I said, Canadian politics is pretty dry and boring. But, it's almost like we've become this internet meme. We've become this, we've become the best reality TV show is turn on Fox News and CNN and just see the just absolute drama and nonsense that's happening in the U.S. Most Canadians are following it. But obviously sharing a 4,000-mile long border between the U.S. and Canada, most Canadians are like, man, we want a strong America. But, what's happening in America right now, it's a crap show right now. You guys are just, what happened? And I mean, we've had this steady decline. And I mean, for 5 years, I would always ask Canadians, like, what do you think of America? What do you think of this? And obviously Canadians love America, but I think most Canadians have really seen the image of America decline tremendously on the international stage. And it's just not what it was before. And so that's where I think, where Nikki Haley is really missing the mark there. Sorry, Alex, I've been going on for a while. You want to add anything to that?
Oh, well, let's call Nikki Haley what she's a neocon.
Yeah,
she's
100%.
been behind a lot of failed, we'll call it conflicts around the world. She's led militaries in there where they shouldn't have gone in. She was in the, cahoots trying to get the Syrian leader Assad out. I mean, this is a country, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm Canadian, you're American. Let's have this chat. We used to love the United States. I think when I was, 16, 18, that was that beacon of, wow, this is what it's going to be. But today, no thanks. Not interested. I'm exactly where I want to be right now. And, when you get people that say, oh, wait a minute, China, communist China, it's, a dictator, yet they'll be the first person that would arrive at the airport in Vietnam. Okay. And then they will be the next people that say, after we're done Vietnam, let's head to Laos. Well, Laos, the Democratic People's Republic of Laos, which was bombed into submission by the Americans. And trust me, and I'm focusing this on, the war machine here, because this war machine's really got this globe into a big mess right now. This has been going on 36 conflicts since World War II. The numbers are staggering. Right at the start of this program, I cranked it off with BlackRock.
Yeah.
There's massive money here, everyone. Massive money. I mean, look at Lithuania's NATO show just recently. I mean, how many salesmen do you think showed up selling arms there? It was like a buffet of what do you want? We got it for sale. Ukraine is a dumping post for all old NATO equipment. And we have this vision. Don't get me wrong. I like Americans. Okay. The issue that I have now is when they start to fund destructions of countries like the Ukraine. You think they're doing Ukraine a favor by pumping in more peace? Their road to peace is more arms, more bombing. That's their road to peace. This is supposed to be a country, when at least I grew up, would be a country of maybe diplomacy. I have not seen a politician or someone come over to Southeast Asia and say, you know what, we will both win together. Well, maybe the last administration, at least, they were strong arming some stuff, but at least they came over and they negotiated deals and they went away with handshakes. We saw that, that walk across the South and North Korean border. We see these things, and where did that go? I mean, it's in Hollywood. They got it in Hollywood, but in today's day and age, all it is, as you say, divide and conquer. They're going to use that playbook. They're going to go into these countries. They're going to destabilize it. Ukraine is not going to figure itself out this year. It's not going to figure itself out next year. That could go on for another 5 years until that country is gone. And that could be the end of it as we see it. Yet, this decision is being made in Washington. And that's what really irks me. I mean, these wars are catastrophic for no matter who you are. And it won't take much, Cyrus. It won't take much to expand on this. One strayed missile into Belarus, and it's game on. It's game on.
But we don't understand. Our politicians don't understand that we're marching more and more closer to a huge hot war. And I mean, that would be absolutely
Very hot.
Very, very hot war. Alex, play that Nikki Haley clip one more time, because I want to now. I talked about the first part of it. Let's talk about the second part, which I think is just completely irresponsible. Let's play that clip one more time.
Yep.
Nikki Haley fought America's enemies at the UN and won.
China's dictators want to cover the world in communist tyranny.
Nikki Haley, tough as nails, smart as a whip, unafraid to speak the truth.
Communist China won't just lose. Like the Soviet Union before it, Communist China will end up on the ash heap of history.
Nikki Haley, a strong leader for a strong America. SFA Fund Inc. is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Cyrus, before you comment, how can somebody be so out of touch with reality?
I mean, well, it's just, I mean, again, it's the propaganda. Smart as a whip. What is it? Tough as nails and smart as a whip. And that's the problem, though, is most Americans, we live in a bubble here in the United States. Most Americans have no concept of anything happening outside of this country, right? So the issue is that you can you can make an ad like this and say, hey, China, China's dictators are trying to take over the world and spread their philosophy. Oh, really? I didn't know that. And the issue is now the second thing is that you look at the second part of that, right? China's government, the Communist Party is going to end on the ash heap of history here, just like the Soviet Union. So essentially what Nikki Haley is calling for, she's calling for regime change in China.
Absolutely.
And, right. She's calling for regime change. She's saying we're going to take down the communist government of China. And the issue with this, Alex, is that from my opinion, this is the most important thing, is that you've missed the assignment, right? You're running for the president of the United States. Your job is to serve the American people. You need to focus on the issues that are a huge issue inside of our country right now. I mean, you look at the public school system in the United States; it's an absolute disaster. I live in Nevada, which is ranked 50th out of 50 in this as far as public school. You cannot send your kids to a public school here, specifically the city of Las Vegas. It's an absolute disaster. I mean, we have I mean, California kids are, they don't have school lunches. I remember reading a story about Florida where, they can't pay the electricity bills and they're contemplating going to a 4-day school week, giving kids off on Friday just so they can save electricity. Like, this is what's happening inside the United States, the supposedly greatest nation in the world. And this is the problem when when you're so focused on external problems. And, the biggest issue is, and again, I want people to be clear, I'm not anti-democracy. I'm not anti-democratic. Again, I think, America's government is fine. I mean, that's what we've chosen. That's what we've used for hundreds of years. And I think, the issue is that, what we need to do is we need to focus on, the issues that are really plaguing America. But the problem is a person like Nikki Haley, they're blaming everything on China. It's the easy scapegoat, and they're tapping into that emotion to try to get your vote. And that is the dangerous thing with this American politics, is that we lack this in-depth thinking. Like you said, how can she be so out of touch with reality? First of all, you've missed the assignment. Regime change in China is not your objective as an American president. And
it ain't going to happen.
And well, the interesting now, and this is what I want people to really take away. What I find a very interesting paradox is that in the United States, we are so scared of communism, right? I mean, the word communism or socialism is very, very scary for most Americans. I mean, this is what we're taught from day one in America, is that communism equals evil. Therefore, if China's communist, then China is evil. That's kind of the way of thinking here. And the funny thing is that if communism is so bad, why are we worried about China then? Like, in my mindset, I'm just like, well, if communism is doomed to fail, why don't we let China just get on with it, right? Why don't we just let China fail, right? Like, if our internal belief is that democracy is such a better form of government and communism is the worst form of government, well, why don't we just let them get on with it, right? If it's destined to fail, let China fail then. But we don't see that. That would be a position of strength and something that says, hey, look, I know that I'm a democracy. I know that I'm the United States. I'm not worried about anything else because we believe we have the best form of government. But the problem is you know that we have a declining democracy. You know that people are losing faith in media. People are losing faith in democracy. One of the guys in the chat here, he just shared something that that was quite interesting. Is that how Chinese perceive the government to be. Like, more Chinese perceive China's government to be more democratic than Americans do, right? That's an interesting thing, because I think when you look at Chinese citizens, okay, when they look at, one of the interesting things I notice about is that it is much more difficult to be a Chinese government official than it is to be an American government official. A lot of people don't realize this, right? We think of the Communist Party as like, oh, look at these guys, they're working for the party, they're living this lavish lifestyle. No, it is incredibly difficult, because if you don't deliver, you're out. I mean, you are, and I mean, if you get caught in a scandal, death sentence, you get life in prison. I mean, there are some very high stakes in being a member of the party. Well, I mean, it's not some cushy job where you're just bankrolling and you've got, oh, I'm siphoning millions off of here, I can do whatever I want. You've got to answer to the people, and you've got to produce results. It's the only way that you can advance in the party. And that is the interesting thing, because that is not how the United States is. You can basically do nothing, and you can just, and what you do is you do siphon off. I mean, look at how Nancy Pelosi, who, I mean, on average, she's earning somewhere between $150,000 to $200,000 a year on her salary. Now she's retired with a net worth of tens of millions of dollars. I mean, 100% insider trading from Nancy Pelosi. I mean, she has milked the system. She has used lobbyists. I mean, she has made tens and tens of millions of dollars and really leveraged her job as a politician in the United States. And that is the interesting thing, is when it's very opposite. When you are a high-ranking government official in China, when you get to a certain level, after you retire, you're not allowed to go into the private sector because you have too much influence. They don't allow that. They want a strict separation there. It's a very different system, where kind of the whole reason that you become a U.S. politician, it's not to serve the people. It's to be able to leverage that. Something like Michael Pompeo, right? Like Michael Pompeo served as the Secretary of State. Now he's retired. Well, what can I do? Well, you know what? I can fly to Taiwan. I can, get a first-class ticket over there, get paid $300,000 US to give a 30-minute speech and basically just talk a bunch of a bunch of BS that is just like, I'm gonna take this very pro, Taiwan independent stance, which by the way, the vast majority of Taiwanese don't want that. They don't want independence. The vast majority of Taiwanese want the status quo. There's a very few Taiwanese want to reunite with China. Very few Taiwanese want actual independence. It's about 2% on both of those sides. Those are the extremist views. Vast majority of Taiwanese, right in the middle. It's like, hey, we're kind of doing our thing in Taiwan. We've been living like this under the threat of China's invasion for 50, 60 years now. But you know what? We're doing our thing, and we just want life to continue. And that is something that people just do not realize in this country. And it's really shocking, Alex, when I'm looking at presidential candidates, when it's like, hey, why is China your number one thing that you're talking about? Right? It's what are you going to do? How are we going to fix the problems inside of this country? You've missed the assignment, Nikki Haley. 100% missed the assignment. And it's completely irresponsible for you as a president to be advocating a regime change in a sovereign country, right? China has to figure out what China can do. If China is going to convert to a democracy, it might happen one day. You never know. But it's going to come from the Chinese people. It's going to come from that government. There has to be a change. I'll be honest. There's no way that Chinese people are not in China thinking like, wow, I really wish we had a system like America. I really wish we had democracy like America. Chinese people are not looking at America and envious of that situation. And I'm sorry, I'm going to go off on, so I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I do want to kind of put in one more point, because a lot of people do say, well, why is it that so many Chinese people are immigrating to the United States? Why are so many Chinese people leaving China? I tell you an interesting story. This is a very interesting thing, Alex. When I went back to Shanghai, I had a chance to take a lot of taxis. And what I noticed, a very big change, is when I was living in Shanghai, most of the taxi drivers were much older, local Shanghainese people, let's say usually above the age of 60. On my recent trip back to Shanghai, most of them are much younger now, kind of between 20 to 30. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. Like, I've never seen so many young people driving taxis. And I said, hey, are you from Shanghai? Because normally Shanghai taxi drivers are local. They all speak Shanghainese amongst each other. It's like, no, I'm from Chongqing. No, I'm from, I'm from Anhui. I'm from different provinces, you know. And I said, wow, that's fascinating. I said, you know, and they would ask me, where are you from? I'm from America. And so I asked them, I said, they said, oh, you know, I've always had an American dream. I've always would love to go to America. And I said, that's interesting. I said, I know that because I really believe that a lot of Chinese people do have an American dream. And I said, what is it about America? You know, what is it about? I said, do you wish that you could, is it because of America's government? Like, do you wish you had a democracy? Do you wish that you could vote for your government? Do you wish that you could, you know, become an American citizen so that you could vote for the president? Is that really the need? And it's like, no, it really has nothing to do with the government. It's just that, you know, I see, for example, he's like, do you know what it's like to be, you know, a small fish in the world's largest pond? Like I'm a taxi driver in Shanghai. Like I don't make much money, right? Like it's hard to be a Chinese person competing against 1.4 billion people. I'm kind of looking at it like the United States is, you know, a quarter of the size. So even if I'm a smaller fish in a smaller pond, maybe I got a chance at making a little bit more money. Like maybe even if I just go work at a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown, you know, maybe I could like make a little bit more money and save more money. It's just kind of more the opportunity to make a little bit more money. And so that's where I think people like, yeah, Chinese people are immigrating to the United States and they are coming over, but it's not because they feel like, oh, you know, oh, thank God I'm in America now. It's I can you know, I can become an American citizen and vote for my president. I don't think Chinese people really give a crap about that. You go back to Chinese people, they like making money, right? That's kind of their mindset here. And, you know, it's like, that's where their interest is. You know, it's just more like I can be a smaller fish in a much smaller pond. I mean, and it's just, as we know, you know, youth unemployment, very high in China right now. You know, you're in your mid 20s. It's a very hard, you know, these people, you know, these guys are struggling. Like, how do you make it? How do you make it to where you can afford housing and things like that? And I think that's where, you know, people are still, you know, interested in that. So I just wanted to kind of add that perspective there because I'm, you know, obviously Chinese people are immigrating to the United States, but it's not, you know, our politicians want us to believe, well, they're immigrating here because of our democracy and because we have the best political system in the world. I don't think Chinese people really give a crap about that. They really don't. I mean, even when I was in Canada and, you know, I was living in Richmond, which by the way, is a suburb of Vancouver. About 74% of the Chinese of the population in Richmond is Chinese descent. I mean, when it was time to vote, nobody voted. No one cared about voting in there. I mean, they didn't get involved in Canadian politics. They had no interest in Canadian politics because it's just like, hey, we're in Richmond. We're amongst our Chinese community. We're, you know, we got our kids in a good school. We like our quality of life here. But the interesting thing, them had a very, you know, they love China as well. And you know, as soon as, you know, we have a 2-week spring break in Canada as opposed to a 1 week in US. Every, you know, 2-week spring break, all of them went back to China. It's like, man, I got to go back to China. Taobao's there, you know, traveling, you know, just like everything is so convenient in China. The convenience, the lifestyle, we love it. Like we love going back to China. It's, you know, they still, you know, people are like, well, why are you immigrating? Well, it's like, well, you know, it's a great opportunity. You know, same reason why did I immigrate to China? You know, why did I move to China as an expat, right? Why would I leave the United States and do that? Why do hundreds of thousands of foreigners go to China? You know, it's opportunities. And so I think that's what people, you know, really need to kind of understand on this thing. Thanks, Alex. That's kind of went off on it.
I want to add to that because, you know, if we take the top 5 countries that immigrate to the United States, of course, is Mexico's number 1, Philippines number 2, India's number 3. We don't see, you know, net migration. Chinese actually leaving a country that maybe they feel unsafe in, which we've seen over the last couple of years with, you know, a lot of Asian hate crimes that have happened throughout that country. Homelessness, skyrocketing mortgages. This all happens. Now, it's all fine and dandy for the Americans to say, hey, you know, look at how many Chinese are coming in. Well, first of all, you bring them into your universities. You charge them double the price.
A lot more than double, buddy. More like seven times.
Okay. Seven times. Right.
7 times.
So this is a country that wants to target China and say, well, you know, they're migrating. Yeah, of course. But people migrate to the United Kingdom. They migrate to France, Germany, England, European Union. I mean, this is a topic. This is a soundbite for every country. And we've got to remember the railway was built by the Chinese in Canada.
Yep.
And this coming from a country in the last couple of months has found drugs in its White House, a dead body in an ex-president's floating pond, Barack Obama. The son of the president arrested on tax fraud and owning a firearm, which he shouldn't have done, something like that.
Yeah.
A prostitute that ended up in his underwear at the husband's home of Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker. And they're arresting Donald Trump on 3 indictments. This is a country we're supposed to take serious. If any of those happened in other parts of the world, those governments would have been run out of town. And we're supposed to be showing compassion and lock the borders down. I mean, it's incredible, the hypocrisy. What set me off was watching that Nikki Haley video. I mean, this is just, as you say, a propaganda machine built up. They're doing it. Ukraine is the circus tour for them right now. Oh, we got the biggest military in the world. You know what? I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. Is because America has left so much garbage in countries that they've had so unsuccessful missions. And nothing against veterans. Hey, veterans, my father was in the war. My grandfather died in the Second World War. I have a military family there. I respect what people do for their commander-in-chief for the country. But this is a military that has seen many people die over senseless wars over the last, 3 or 4 decades. Now they're sitting back in their armchair military, sitting there pumping, we're talking staggering amounts of military arms going to these countries.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, Cyrus, they think they can bulldoze into some of these Southeast Asian countries and get away with it. I don't think so anymore, because you're talking about a country like China that has built its military, that has not been in conflicts in almost 50 years, and is getting stronger, stronger, and stronger. And I know the audience is immediately going to jump out and say, yeah, but they have experience. Oh, yeah. How's that experience working out for you guys in the Ukraine right now? Training all these NATO troops. It's not happening.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And I think, Alex, there's so many good things. I think we've had a really good, great stream today. And I'm just really happy we could talk about this thing, because I want you to bring up that one slide, though, can you bring up the slide that shows, I want to reveal the answer. Who is America's greatest threat? And bring up that one slide that shows like what Americans think. Who is the greatest threat?
The other one. Do you know what number it is?
I don't. The other one.
Not this one, right? We've already done that.
We've done
this one. How about that one?
That's the one. So half of Americans name China as the greatest threat to the United States. Okay, but the answer is on that board. Okay, and it is the last one at the bottom there. It is the United States. 2% of Americans think that the U.S. poses the greatest threat to the U.S. So that's the right answer. The United States' biggest, issue, the biggest hindrance, the biggest obstacle that the United States has is always going to be itself. And I think there's a video that I highlighted this earlier, Alex, is that, we had a guy by the name of Richard Haas, who, that's good. You can take that off the screen, buddy. Yeah. So Richard Haas, he has basically, I shared this in a video earlier that is really important. It was one when I talked about the French protest. And Richard Haas said, look, for 20 years, he's been leading the #1 think tank in America that is basically dictating foreign policy decisions inside this country. And Richard Haas said, after serving this for 20 years, I'm going to retire. And my biggest takeaway is that our biggest problem is the United States. And that is quite a statement for the director of a think tank that has been the #1 influence into foreign policy decisions for the United States. And again, this is why I always say that I try to be as balanced and rational as possible, because the reality is I'm looking at people like a Richard Haas. There's also another guy named Ryan Haas, who is now the president of the Brookings Institute. Very, very good insights and much more objective into the U.S.-China relationship. Ryan Haas wrote a great article talking about how we're making a very strategic blunder in regards to Taiwan, because we're looking at Taiwan as an asset. Okay. And he said, look, Taiwan is not an asset that is under our control. Taiwan is merely an economic partner. We do business with Taiwan. We have a great relationship. Obviously, U.S.-Taiwan relationship is great. There's no doubt about that. No one's going to deny that. But we cannot look at them as an asset that we can control, because doing that goes against the will of the Taiwanese people. You need to, there are some people inside the United States government that are being very objective and rational. You look at their histories and their experience dealing with foreign policy. It's much better than someone like a Nikki Haley, even though she served on the United Nations. She is a neocon. She is a huge
Massive
China hawk that is just lacks the rational thinking, right? I mean, guys like Marco Rubio, Tom Cotton, these guys are they just want to go on your emotions and say a bunch of nonsense. But you actually look at some rational thinking and some people that really understand how complex this relationship is, you're going to be able to find some golden nuggets of wisdom. There are people in the United States government that do have the ability to think with a brain and actually make some rational decisions in regard to this. Ryan Haas with the Brookings Institute, I believe he's one of those guys that says that. But Richard Haas saying, look, our biggest problem is always going to be the United States. And the best thing that the United States can do, Alex, is if we really want to show the world that democracy is the best, we have to be the shining example. But our democracy is backsliding so fast. Our nation is so polarized in this country that we are effectively split down the middle, right? You're either Republican or you're Democrat, and both sides absolutely hate each other. Absolutely hate each other. And that is a huge issue for the United States because, that basically means whoever is the president, if it's a Democrat or Republican, half the country is going to absolutely hate them. And when Joe Biden is in office, the Republicans, their entire mission is let's block anything Joe Biden does, because he's not our party. We don't like him. And as soon as Donald Trump or whoever other Republican comes to party, that's the same thing the liberals are going to say. Let's block everything they try to do because we don't agree with them. So you constantly have this stalemate. Again, I want to say that one more time. There's not a country in the world that is looking at the United States right now and saying, we want to emulate that government. We want to be like that government. That is a shining example of how our government can function. So if the U.S. really wants to be a positive force in the world, if we really want to encourage China to be a democracy, well, give China a reason to do so. Because right now, if I'm Chinese, I'm not looking at the U.S. and saying like, oh, that's a model country I want to be like. They're looking at it from the perspective. And this is an interesting thing, right? This is why, for example, why are people moving to Nevada where I'm at right now? Well, one, because of our state, we have no state income tax. People are moving to Nevada, Texas, and Florida. They're moving to Republican red states because basically the liberal governments are destroying cities around the world. LA, Portland, Seattle, all of these very, very liberal, cities are, California, which is probably the most blessed place in the world. I mean, California is just phenomenal. The beach, the coastline, the weather. I mean, it should be the best state in the United States. And it's a great, and I love going to California. I go there for holiday because it's an absolutely beautiful stuff. I have, an aunt that lives in Laguna Beach, one of the most beautiful places in the entire planet. Absolutely stunning. But you can't live there. The politics have destroyed California because of just this crazy liberal thinking, and the taxes are insane. I mean, it is sad to see the state of California, and there is, 9 out of 10 people that are moving to Las Vegas are coming from California. And if they're not coming to Nevada, they're going to Texas, they're going to Florida, they're going to places because that is a good advantage of the United States, is that if you go to individual states, the government is less involved in your life. But I got to be honest, Alex, I talk to Americans like, hey, what do you think of our government? It sucks. I hate it. It's garbage. Our politicians are terrible. No one likes the government here. Nobody likes the government in the United States. No one is proud of our government. No one cares. Do you trust the United States government? Are you out of your mind? Why would we trust them? Do you think they have our best interest at heart? Not a chance. So it's very interesting where, if you ask Americans, does your politicians, do they serve you? Absolutely not. Do you have trust in them? Absolutely not. Do you like your government? Absolutely not. You see Americans going to states that have the least government influence. And again, like what I see, what's positive here is, for example, if you open up a corporation in the state of Nevada, you can, legally avoid more taxes. You can write business expense off. You don't have to pay state income tax. So you can leverage that. And that's what people are doing. That's an advantage of the United States, that, you can try to go to states where there's less government influence. And the people that I have found that are very successful in the United States, they basically want nothing to do with the government, and it's just like, just let me live my life and just leave me alone, because I've lost complete trust in you, and just leave me the heck alone. And it is a very different thing where, where we see China's government, at least like, again, like I interviewed a guy named Brian Linden who has lived in China since 1983, originally from LA, American. He's doing amazing things in Western China. He has partnered, he's built hotels. He is, he's like, look, like I'm living in the rural parts of China. You know who gets involved? The local mayors, the local community. I mean, it's a much different system. And again, I'm not here to try to portray China's government as this model government. I'm not trying to say it doesn't have its problems. But what people don't realize is that it's much more, it's actually very similar to the United States in one regard. In China, the local government plays a very big role. If you are in a local village out in Western China, you're not dealing with politics from Beijing. You're going to your local mayor or your local village chief, and it's like, hey, we don't have enough electricity here. You know what? Like, let's solve that problem. Hey, we don't have enough water to water our plants. We need better irrigation systems. That's where you're going. And those issues are like, hey, we need irrigation. Like, let's sort this thing out. And, I remember Daniel Dumro, he went into Xinjiang and he went to this village where it's like, they didn't have a good water solution. And then it's like, okay, we're going to have an 18-month plan to build this new thing. Then they're like, well, wait a minute. If they don't have proper water, that's not an 18-month project. Send in double the amount of workers, get it done in 6 months, because this is a priority. People need water. Like if they're not having proper water, there's a massive issue. Get this thing sorted, not now, but right now. And so again, it's just, I want people to have, that needs to be brought to the table, Alex. We need to discuss that as well. We need people to understand that it's a lot more complex and there's a lot more nuances that are there. It's not Xi Jinping running the show as a one-man show. That you want a government like that, it's called North Korea. Kim Jong-un, he runs the tables. He does anything that he wants. And you see the results. Look at North Korea. It's the most censored, the most sanctioned, the most completely cut off from the outside world. Nobody in North Korea knows what the heck is going on anywhere in the world. That's a very different model. That is unfortunately what many people in America think. They think that China is like that. Well, Chinese people have no idea what America is like. Are you kidding me? They watch American TV. They watch American shows. I mean, they travel to America. Chinese people go there all the time. I mean, it's amazing, how many cities Chinese people can rat off and know about. And, your average Chinese knows a lot more about the United States than the United States citizen knows about China. I mean, we don't know anything about China. And, this is why I'm really happy to, call you a close friend, a colleague, a partner, whatever you want to call it. I mean, we do a lot of YouTube videos together. We're going to be back on the ground in China together here relatively soon, I hope. And, Alex, it's been a great stream today. But again, I think it's just trying to be a little bit more rational. I want to thank everybody in the comment section. I did have a couple of super chats come in. It's been a while. So let me just give them a quick shout out here, because it's Jacqueline, a mom, sent in a nice thank you emoji. Really appreciate that. And also Liu Ray May, thank you so much. And again, this is a tweet that I sent out. Go back to that one, Alex. Keep it there, it's fine. This is a really good one. As recently as 2017, China wasn't even on the list of countries Americans considered enemies. Then there was a concentrated effort to add China, move it to number one, right when the intelligence agencies started feeding media negative stories about China from 2018. That is, of course, when the Donald Trump trade war happened. We saw all of these tensions start ramping up. And now you go back to the other slide there, Alex. I mean, this is really interesting, right? 2017, everybody's fearing North Korea. And now you go back to here. This is my tweet. 50% of Americans now see China as the greatest threat. Just 6 years ago, it wasn't even on the list. This just shows us how big, Trump's trade war and the media's anti-China coverage has been. And, I put a little sheep emoji there because that is unfortunately for most Americans, we are these kind of blind sheep that are being led down, and really fed whatever we want to do. And and this is why I think it's so important to have more rational thinking. I'm going to end it on this one, Alex. And I actually have a video coming out tomorrow morning talking specifically about the microchips, because you have microchips it's amazing. China is really outsmarting the US here. I mean, they are really, it's incredible the strategy that they've released, but we are seeing Korea, we're seeing Taiwan, we're seeing Japan all come out and say, look, you cannot sanction this. We just had the three largest microchip CEOs, NVIDIA, Qualcomm, and Intel. Those three CEOs went to Joe Biden's office in the White House and said, look, you are destroying the local chip market here in America. You are destroying our companies because you are cutting us off. You're basically sanctioning American companies. The U.S. is self-censoring or self-sanctioning our own companies to sell to their number one customer. And it's quite simple. Like, this is an interesting insight. I break it all down in tomorrow's video, so make sure you tune in tomorrow morning. I got a brand new video that's going to launch, and it's basically Intel saying, we want to build the world's biggest chip manufacturing hub in Ohio. But if you cut off our revenue to China, there's no need to build that anymore. So we're making America weaker with our own policies and stuff like that. So anyways, that's all I got for today. Thank you, everybody. We've had an amazing stream. Really appreciate your support.
Thanks, Cyrus. I appreciate that. I guess we'll head out from here. We'll put a bit of music on. You guys take care. I got a big video coming out, the world's prison system. That's going to be quite interesting. You guys take care. From all of us here, Let's Talk China. You guys have yourself a fantastic day. Take care.